Okay, so 1, 2, 3. It's recording, I think. Okay.
Now I can't hear you. Now I hear you again. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, thank you, Daniel, for taking my invite, and I would like to introduce you a bit. So, Daniel is entrepreneur who connects entrepreneurs to people, executives for business partnerships and other opportunities. And today I wanted to ask him some questions to give some value to my following. So, Daniel, tell me, how did you start and as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So I started, as an entrepreneur, I started really early on. I think the first entrepreneurial experience was when I was on a school campus and I was selling burned CDs.
Okay.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. And then a lot of other stuff followed. I started a consulting company pretty early on. I started a search engine optimization company early on, one of the first ones in Switzerland. So it started lots of different companies, built an online shop for all kinds of trend products. That was like super early. So I've always been an entrepreneur, I guess, in that sense. I always loved creating things, building new things, and then I spent the first 9 years of my career in corporate. So I've always been in sales. I always worked with companies in terms of opening new markets, building up revenues, building up teams. And then about 6 years ago, I think 2013 it was, I started my own company, started a consulting company basically. And that's sort of like how I got started more into a sustainable business, because the businesses that I built before, some were sustainable in terms of they could have been built bigger, but it was just stuff I didn't enjoy. And others were totally unsustainable. They were just built for a year to ride on a wave of a trend, and then it was gone. So this was sort of like where my, I guess, where the story started of building a bit more of a sustainable business.
Okay. Okay. So how did you come across Leaders, the idea of Leaders Bridge? Because that's the company that you lead now.
Yes. So I started this consulting company about 6 years ago, and it was really, really consulting, coaching, working with companies all over the world in business development. When it comes to strategic partnerships, also expanding into the Swiss market was a big topic always for those companies. So I built a consulting company. It was nice, but I missed the network aspect, because whenever I worked with companies, specifically on the Swiss market, there was usually tech companies in the professional services space, usually somewhere in between there. And what always happened when I worked with them, I had to sort of like start from zero, because it was consulting, so we started again from zero. But the networks that they wanted to access were fairly similar. There were really usually high-level, C-level leaders in the technology space, in the business, in the corporate, in the entrepreneurial space in Switzerland. So I thought, okay, that's interesting, because maybe why not build a network on the one side then that would at one point integrate with the consulting business. But there was another reason. I think there was 2 other reasons why I started a Leaders Bridge, or how I don't know if I came across it really. I think it just fell from the sky. The name, the brand of it, I don't think I came across it. I think it just fell from the sky. But basically how the idea came to place was, I've always been frustrated with Switzerland as a business ecosystem in terms of our interconnectivity. Like, there's a lot of ecosystems around the world that have a high, I call it interconnectivity, basically meaning the stakeholders in the different groups and in different clusters work well together. So the entrepreneurs and the corporates work well together, the investor community works well together with everybody else. And in Switzerland, it's very fragmented. It's very, very fragmented. And especially the corporates and the entrepreneurs, they really don't work well together at this point. I was always been frustrated with that. It's part of our Swiss DNA of our looking only about after our little gardens. Yeah. And I felt we needed to do something about that. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring those two groups closer together. So that's one of the reasons why I started Leaders Bridge, specifically with the CEO Collaboration Day, which is a series of events happening now twice a year, where we get together 25 of those people in roundtable exchanges for a whole day. We put them we lock them into a room basically for a whole day and have to exchange around their biggest challenges. Very select group of people, and it's always capped at around 25 because we want to keep it intimate and personal. So that's that. And then there's another reason why I started Leaders Bridge, and it's because like whenever we talk about high profile entrepreneurs, like famous people in the business space or interesting stories, we always sort of like, even in Europe, we seem to go to the US always. We seem to go to other places. And Switzerland is not really talked about as a place with great entrepreneurs and great leaders, not really at all. We have some other things that we've talked about, but not really that. So I looked into the ecosystem, and I always knew that we also have amazing people in Switzerland. You have great stories here. We have incredible stories, entrepreneurial stories, but most people don't know about that. Also, of course, because we Swiss are very humble. We don't like to talk about ourselves too much. Our American friends are much better at talking about themselves.
Like Polish people.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. You guys are much better at talking about yourself than we are. Ways better.
Oh.
Yeah, ways better. We are incredibly humble in a sense and very close-knit in that sense. So I thought, okay, why not shine a light on the stories that matter, that I feel that matter, the stories that are interesting, the people that are interesting in the market. So I started a series of interviews, handpicking people that I wanted to engage with, that I wanted to share the story with. And I interviewed about 100 people so far over the past 4 or 5 years, I think, in the Swiss ecosystem, entrepreneurs and executives on both sides. And basically to feature their stories, but also to have a platform that would go beyond the business school. You go to business school, you get out, and then very often what's powerful is mentoring, but not everybody has access to great mentors around them usually. So I wanted to create a platform where people could learn from other people's lessons, understand the pitfalls in certain areas, and get inspired basically by people's stories and have the feeling that, okay, maybe there's something interesting here, or this is an interesting career choice maybe, or this is an interesting business choice. So that's how this all came into place, and that's where we built the interview series, built the roundtable exchanges, really for those different purposes, and that's how it sort of like was created.
Okay, great. So what was next? How did you develop the relationships with the executives? I know that you are doing it with the use from LinkedIn, with the use of LinkedIn. So how did you develop the relationship?
Yeah, so like I always believe that like a relationship, in a sense of, you're never really developing a relationship just for the sake of relationship. You want to provide value, and you also want to receive value, right? So you want to anchor it into something that is valuable. So what I realized is with those two vehicles, the roundtable exchanges for those two groups, and the series of interviews, they were incredibly great magnets as well, because specifically talking about the series of interviews, which is basically what I mean by that is basically an interview is basically what we're doing here. We have a 30-minute recorded conversation around their story, around what matters most to them, about their vision of the future, about their lessons learned, exciting stuff basically in their specific field. And it's really interesting. I realized the higher up I go in the food chain, so to say, the easier it is to get people on board for that. So I remember one guy I wanted to have on the show, and he's the CEO of a billion Swiss franc company. And I wanted to get him on the show. I wanted to interview him, and I thought, okay, it would be difficult. But I reached out to him on LinkedIn, and within a couple of minutes, he responded back and said, "Hey, set up a call with my assistant. Here's a number." It was sort of like it wasn't difficult, and I think it has to do with the right pitch. in a sense, but it's not a sales pitch. It's actually a pitch that creates value for them. Because what I always pitched, what I sold with the interview series is two things. One is sort of like the philanthropic aspect of saying, okay, you know, you've done a lot of great things. Why don't you, you know, share that? Why don't you give something back? Why don't you help the next generation? You know, that's very powerful. And the other side is, and by the way, it's also great personal branding, you know, for you, you know, even if you're the CEO of $1 billion Swiss franc or $1 billion Swiss franc company, you're going to look for a job at one point, right? And so it's the same thing. You want to attract the best people, right? You want to attract the best opportunities. And a great way of doing that is having a very strong personal brand and a very authentic personal brand. So I always pitch those two things, and they seem to resonate really well. So what I learned in this process,
they are, sorry to interrupt, but they are very humble. Yeah. So when you tell them you can develop your brand, they have in mind, okay, no, okay, my brand is not too big, not too bright. Okay, that's a good idea.
Yes, but just to clarify, definitely not everybody. What it's also great for, it's a great filter, because I always had this thing that I could only deal with certain people. There's only a certain group of people around in this world that I can deal with, and it's usually the entrepreneurial people. I can't deal with I don't know, the average employee or the manager. I can't deal with those people. I get so frustrated from moment zero. It's also a great filter for those who actually want to show up or want to speak up and are pioneering certain things, because it's worth to talk about it. So it's also a great filter. And the other humbled, so they see the pitch that actually worked best so far is, and that's very controversial, is where it doesn't seem to give them anything. Meaning, basically, the pitch is, you've done a lot of great things. Why don't you give something back? Why don't you share? The pitch would be them giving something. But actually, what that does is, that's what gives them the most. Because, and when I say them, it's basically people who are extremely accomplished. Very often, people who never have to work again in their lives. People who have accomplished pretty much anything material you could possibly imagine having in this world. At that level, very often, what they're looking for is not. So if you have the hierarchy of needs, Maslow hierarchy of needs, I always explain it like that, right? There's that last level, right? It's self-fulfillment, basically. That's basically what everybody's looking for at that level. And it's a never-ending journey, and that's great, except, you know, you get to the top once you die, basically. You know? And the last level in between is a never-ending journey, basically. But the journey in itself is then the fulfilling piece. And what I basically pitched, so to say, is that part, the self-fulfillment part. And that's what they jump on the most, because everything else doesn't matter to them, because they already have everything else there. So none of that matters to them. Even if it's 10% more in there, they don't care. It's not interesting. What they care about is the last layer of the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And of course, now we're talking about very personal stuff, right? So, you know, so how does that translate into doing business, selling stuff? I don't know, whatever you want to talk about. I always believe that the best entry door into a business conversation is a personal conversation. And that works really well in Switzerland. So if you have people trust you, which is all about personal, the personal side of things, the emotional side of things, business is so much easier. If you have people like you, trust you, believe you actually know what you're talking about, it's so much easier to do business versus figuring out what the perfect sales pitch is. That's never going to really land with the best customers from the very beginning. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in there we can dive into if you want.
Okay, tell me, what is the best mentality when you approach executives in social media? How to overcome the mentality of pitch, and sell, to the mentality of the good mentality to approach it.
Okay, so So just a disclaimer, I can really only talk about Switzerland because I'm Swiss. I've always, not only worked in the Swiss market, but the Swiss market has always been my playground, so to say.
Yeah.
So I know that really well. I can't speak for China or the US very much, or Poland maybe. So I know the Swiss mentality, of course, because I'm Swiss, but also because I've done business in Switzerland my whole life. So what works best basically is, and this may sound really basic, but to focus on the person and not on what you want, or what the best pitch is maybe, or like perfectly tailoring a pitch to their needs. That's not what matters, because this can work for a mass marketing campaign, that's fine. But if you're dealing with very high level decision makers and very high end B2B environments, then that really doesn't work so well. What works well is the personal relationship there. So what I would always focus on is finding the personal entry door, understanding human needs there is very powerful. Like I said before, basically understanding that what people are looking for is that personal fulfillment piece at that level. So, it could be anything. Like I focus on the personal branding because that's something I really enjoy doing. It's really something I'm good at. It could be other things. But in terms of the pitch, what works really well is to just simply be like, yes, you got to be to the point, but you got to be really authentic in your communication. Like, just got to be real, just got to be human. And I mean, and there's a lot of, we don't have time to go into all kinds of details here, but if you're interested, maybe we can link to it somewhere. I have created, I think you have that well as well, the PDF, right? 23 mental triggers. I share a lot of actual messages and examples with detailing out exactly why they work, why they don't work, and all that stuff. So we can link to that someplace, I guess.
It would be awesome.
Check it out. Yeah, so, but basically at the end of the day, it's really about making a human connection, a personal connection about somebody. And it's not saying, oh, I just saw that we went to the same school. Nobody gives a shit about that. Nobody cares if we went to the same school. But it's more about the personal connection. So if people, I'll give you an example now. If people on LinkedIn, they say, I'm the chief digital officer from this big bank, and what I really care about is customer experience. What I really care about is putting business first and not have technology be the main driver. And that's perfect. I mean, to me, that's pure gold, because I have everything in there to create a message that is absolutely irresistible, because I was just simply engaged with those pieces. I will say something like, and whatever you say has to be true, okay? It has to be true. It has to be authentic, real. You can't tailor messages that are weird and not true. Like when somebody says, I love baseball, and you hate baseball, and you say, oh, I also love baseball. That's bullshit. That doesn't work. That breaks everything. But basically, in such a context, I would simply tailor the message to that. And I would say something like, it's really inspiring how you look at the world in terms of digital, and how you fulfill your role, as a CDO at this large bank, and you're not thinking in too many traditional ways, and this and this and this, and that really engages people. Really, really engages people. It gets people excited, because what you're doing is you're tailoring whatever you say to what they believe. So their belief system, their perspective, their opinion, which are extremely strong emotional triggers, and you tailor your messaging to that, and you hook people, because simply what you do is you put a mirror in front of them. That's all you really do. And then they see themselves in the mirror, really, and they realize, oh, there's somebody there who understands me, who gets me, who knows what they're talking about. All these things are suddenly triggered in an instant, and you don't need to say, oh, I've done this and I'm experiencing that, so the other person thinks that you know what you're talking about. It's not about that. You simply need to engage with people in who they are and become a mirror image in that sense. But it doesn't mean you need to become them. You still, how do I describe that best? You stay as much as possible who you are. That's the most important thing. but then you build a bridge to them, which is basically making the connection between what they believe in the most, what they're most passionate about, what they believe the world should look like. And that's the strongest emotional connection you can ever make. And then from there, doing business, that's easy. Doing business is hard when you start with a sales pitch. But when you start from there and you have people in the same boat with you, then business is easy.
Yeah, that's great. So when you approach, when they are approached, so you are going to LinkedIn, you approach them, you set up a conversation or a meeting, and what's next? The meeting is over, and how do you follow up with them?
I mean, it kind of depends, what you're doing. I mean, I can give you my example, but my example is maybe irrelevant. But what we're doing at Leaders Bridge is really build the bridges. So we actually work with, tech companies and professional service companies to do that with them for the Swiss market, to help them get introduced, to help them get in touch, to help them build the networks and everything. So I can share a couple of examples maybe from there. But in general, what you do is, so you have the first meeting. What you always need to be understanding from your own perspective is what you actually sell, what the value proposition. This stuff needs to sit. If that's not clear, then don't even bother doing anything out there. This stuff has to sit. Okay, this stuff has to be clear. You got to know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're not going to make anyone believe that you know what you're doing. Not going to happen. Not going to work. So you need to have these things in place. So you need to always understand, what are you selling at the end of the day. And it's different from situation to situation. In some situation, you maybe say, okay, I'm selling myself, or I'm selling a product, or I'm selling a service, or I'm selling, I don't know, an introduction, I'm selling an investment. I don't know, whatever it is, at the end of the day, you got to be clear about what you're selling. And if that's always at the back of your mind, it's a good place to start, to go into the conversations like that. But then in the conversations, like when you're meeting with somebody, you simply, especially in the initial conversations, don't be too focused on structure. And this goes completely against much of the stuff that is out there. Like one example, so you probably have seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. And Jordan Belfort is now doing sales trainings. And this guy is absolutely incredible. This guy is a master at sales. Of course he is, right? And he's, in some areas, he's saying the exact opposite of what I'm saying. But that's because he has a slightly different perspective and a slightly different area of expertise than I have. But basically what I'm saying is, when you go into the first conversation, you need to understand, of course, what you actually want to get out of the conversation. In a sense, what's the outcome? You need to understand the general purpose of the conversation. You need to understand what you need to know. Like intelligence gathering is always great, is always powerful. But don't be overly structured, because there's a lot of stuff that matters in between the lines that actually builds the trust and builds the likability and credibility and all these things. And then how do you follow up after the conversation? I would follow up in the conversation, because if you're following up after the conversation, you miss the train. Because what you should always talk about at the end of the conversation is what's next, and agree on something. Create an agreement at the end, towards the end of the conversation. Be very specific. And that's where the important part comes in terms of, you got to be structured, you got to know what you want, you got to be clear. But the thing is, you may not know that for the first 45 minutes of the conversation. You may only know it at minute 46. So you got to be doing a bit of improv there. But then use the last piece to define what's next. So when are we going to meet next? What am I going to prepare until the next conversation? What do you need to think about? What do you need to gather? What do I need to send you? Define that and create an agreement. Because if there's no agreement, it's a loose, it's completely loose. There's no container where the actual value can be created. So the container is basically the agreement. And in the agreement, you simply say, okay, so until next Wednesday, I'll send you this, I'll prepare that, and you do this, and you do that. And if we have that, can we then agree that we're going to meet up in 2 weeks and actually discuss X, Y, Z? And now it's a very different conversation than, oh, it was nice meeting you, bye-bye. And then you think, oh, how should I follow up? Well, of course, forget about that. That's a waste of your time and everybody's time. So I will create an actual strong agreement that defines their responsibility, your responsibility, and then if those responsibilities are met, what's next?
Yeah, so that's great what you said, because I'm always trying to be so creative in these follow-ups, because when you are approaching normal clients, smaller companies, you have to be creative in the follow-up because they have to think about it, or they not decisive, and so on and so on. But as you speak, when it seats, when you create the relationship in 20 or 40 minutes, and you feel it, just like Bruce Lee said, don't think, feel. So then it's a opportunity to talk about the follow-up. Yeah, that's cool.
And
okay.
I would go further there, because what you mentioned is I need to think about it. I mean, that's the worst excuse in the world,
Yeah.
But what you do with that, that's what matters. What do you do with that? Do you say, okay, think about it, and then we'll come back? And in some cases that may be okay, it depends. But like there's two different ways of looking at the world. And one is, if you look at it through the sales lens, that's not applicable for everybody. But for some people, if you look at it through the sales lens, it feels strange to go further when they say they need to think about it, because you don't want to pressure people, you don't want to push them into something. So that's your sales lens. But the problem is not going further. The problem is the lens that you have on, because through the lens that you're looking at, you're saying it's a bad thing to go further. If you switch over here and put in the service lens, and you say basically, I don't care if I make a sale right now or not, but what I care about is service. It's about providing value. If you look at it through that lens, and then you ask yourself, does it make sense to go further? It's a definite yes, because you understand that, or you know that there's certain things they don't understand. There's certain things that they need to know to make an actual decision. And it doesn't serve them to be in the space of, let me think about it. Because let me think about it is not good for you, and it's not good for them. Because for you, it's a maybe, and that's the shittiest place in the world. And for them, it's still top of their mind. They always say, oh, I need to follow up at one point. Even if they don't care too much, it's still at the back of their mind, or at the back of their inbox. Where it's about, I need to. So take away that pain from them and say, what do you need to think about? Or just go deeper there and understand. And I think the most important thing there is, it is not the purpose of going deeper, is not to have everything resolved so you can make the sale, because you don't know if there is a sale. You only know if there is a sale when the contract is signed. Before, you don't know if there's a sale. And you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So that's not the purpose. The purpose is service. The purpose is serving them. The purpose is providing value. And if you stay on that track, even if that person never turns into a customer, they may turn into a referral source. They may turn into whatever.
Yeah. When they see that you care. Yeah. And that's what Grant Cardone is talking about also. You know it. You know him.
Yes. I know Grant. Yes.
Yeah, and he shows how to react to the I have to think about it. So
Yes.
it's a matter of knowing, okay, knowing the reaction to this kind of objection, because he can tell you, okay, I have to think about it. I have to talk with my wife or my spouse. I have to check with my hamster
Exactly.
or something
Yes.
like that. And you have to know, yeah, this is an objection or a complaint.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And what I would add to that is, if you're in the sales lens, the problem is often your self-worth or your confidence gets in the way, because the sales lens is okay if you're totally, utterly, invincibly confident. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah, it's all be solved.
that's totally fine, because then your sales lens automatically turns into the service lens.
Yeah.
There is then no sales lens. But if there's a sales lens, the problem with the sales lens is actually that your self-worth, your low self-worth gets in the way.
Yeah.
And says, okay, why do you believe that you're pushing them into something? Because maybe you think what you have is not right for them. If you believe what you have is not right for them, then why on earth are you talking to them?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, right? Then you should just right now stop the conversation and move on.
Yeah. And go to the psychologist to rewire your brain.
maybe. But, or simply just create the awareness and move to the service lens.
Yeah.
Because in the service lens, there is no self-worth issue, because you're not focusing on yourself. You're focusing on them and only on them. And you understand, and you know, how do you know if you're in the service lens? You know, in the service lens, if there's no self-worth issue, if you're purely focusing on them, then you're in the service lens. Otherwise, you're in the sales lens.
Yeah. That's a great point. Okay, Daniel, I think that is it. I don't want to make you tired.
No, it's okay.
I think you can talk about this the whole day.
Well, yes, and yeah, but that may be too long.
Yeah, too long. Maybe we should take you to Warsaw and make some give some courses. Okay, thank you a lot for the interview, and I hope we will make some other interviews in the future, maybe with other questions, with other things. And what do you want to add?
That's it.
Like to add?
I would suggest, if you want to go deeper into understanding sort of like the psychology behind those things and the mental triggers and how to actually create messages, I mean, check out like the PDF.
Check out the PDF. We'll add. I will add this interview to YouTube, I think, and the ebook will be under the video as a link. Yeah, and
great.
My followers will take a look. So take a look at the ebook right now. It will be a great ad for you, and that's it.
Great, thanks.
I don't know how to finish interviews, so let's finish it right now. Thank you a lot.
Thanks.
How should I?